Hello, everyone. Ramdas here at Bhakti House. Um, very shortly, we'll start Yoga Nidra, but before I begin leading that, I've had a couple of questions from people recently that I thought it would be a good idea for me to share this with you, because it's a common question that I get. As people practice yoga, especially as you practice Amrit Yoga, because that's the intent, you learn how to break your reactive patterns. Someone pushes your button and you realize that your button's not being pushed because the button has vanished. It's fallen right off. So the question often comes up, or rather, as it says in the description, quite literally, I was asked the question, Ramdas, I had this situation come up and I was able to break my reaction to it. I didn't react the way I typically do. In fact, I didn't react at all. But it's now 24 hours later and I still need to respond to this situation. What do I do? Now what? And I received a phone call earlier today from a friend asking very much the same question. My life seems to be going crazy right now. I'm having a difficult time with all these things that are going on. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And one of the questions I asked this person was, well, how's your practice right now? What's your sadhana like? And they said, well, it's a little bit off. Okay. So get on your mat and practice. Even if it's just 5 minutes. Practice, practice, practice every day. That's the foundation for everything else. But back to the central question, now what? A lot of the times we ask someone that we believe is in charge, someone in the know, for advice. And when I've been at the Amrit Yoga Institute, I have watched quite literally hundreds of people ask Yogi Amrit Desai, Gurudev, I have this situation, and they will give out the details of the situation. What do I do? And really, when we're doing that, when we're asking advice like that, we are asking for someone else to make the decision for us so we don't have to. That gives us freedom from, at least we believe, the responsibility of, well, if things go bad, it's your fault because you gave me bad advice. But the funny thing is, when things go well with that advice, we then take credit for it. Oh, yeah, I did this. It was great. It was me. At other times, people do ask advice, and really they're asking for, how can I work my way through this? How would you make a decision about this? Do you have any ideas for me to consider? That kind of advice is not a problem because we're not placing any burden on the person we're asking advice from. We're not saying, you tell me what to do, I'll go do it, and then either you'll get in trouble for it or I'll take the credit for it. We're instead saying, hey, you have some experience. Do you have any tips for me in this difficult situation that I'm in? So what is it that I told these two people? What is it that I've shared with other people? We each have 3 different centers within us. Well, not really, there's only one center, but we have this thinking center, and that's where we spend most of our time. We're over here thinking. I can figure my way through things. And then we have feeling, and most of us don't really like to get into that. We don't want to deal with feelings. And we often think of emotion instead of the actual sensation that we feel in the body. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have being, where we're simply being. We're not trying to think our way out of it. We're not avoiding any of the sensations we feel. We're just allowing ourselves to be. And when we're over here toward feeling and being, and we're not running away from what we feel, and we're just allowing ourselves to be, to watch what's happening. Then thoughts that come up, they're more likely to enhance that sense of feeling and being. So what is it that we do? How do we make this thing work? How can we be over here and feeling and being so that the thoughts that come up are more in line with this feeling and being center? Really, the process is fairly simple to describe. The first thing you have to do is get this thing to be quiet. And so this is kind of an advanced practice, because for most of us, this thing is not quiet. And that's why it's so important to start with the basics of yoga, because the basics of yoga are all about get this thing quiet. So we let this thing be quiet. We let it be still. And then we take a moment to review the circumstances. What is the issue I'm wanting to deal with? And then we let the mind get quiet again. We don't try to figure it out. We don't try to work our way through it. Let the mind get quiet. Once the mind's quiet, then we simply wait. We ask ourselves, what's next? What's the next appropriate thing for me to do? And then we wait. And we be very still. And if a thought comes up, and it's accompanied with fanfare, it's a huge epiphany, and you're like, oh, duh, why didn't I think of that in the first place? That's a thought to go with. But that doesn't happen very often. So don't go looking for that every time. Instead, what typically happens is a thought will come up. Just an average, ordinary thought. And so you let the thought go back down. Let the mind get still again. And then another thought will come up. And if it's the same thought, so now that the same thought has come up twice, go with that. That's the thought you want to go with. There is a catch. The catch is very often that thought that comes up, your reaction to it is, oh, I don't want to do that. It'll make it worse. And notice by even just saying it will make it worse, we've already decided what the outcome is going to be, and we've already decided the outcome is bad. And the truth is that the thing we think is going to make it worse will really just make it more intense. It's going to ask us usually to do something we don't want to do, and that's going to make what we feel more intense. That may make the situation more intense. It's not going to make it bad. It's not going to suddenly turn it evil. But we have to keep the mind quiet as we do this. Don't start looking for ideas to fix things or to make things better. Because as I just said, it may make it more intense. And then you go do that thing, whatever the thing is. So as I mentioned, I had a friend a while back who came to me one morning and she said, there's the situation with this person and it's happened before, but this time I didn't react. Now what? So I asked her, think about the situation, let your mind be still, ask yourself what next, let the mind be still, don't look for something to fix it or make it better, just let the mind be still and watch for those recurring thoughts. And she said, after she did this little exercise, and it only took 2 or 3 minutes. It's not a very long deal. It's not like you have to sit for hours on end. It doesn't take very long. She said, I'm so glad you said, don't look for something to fix it. Don't look for something to make it better. Because that's what I was going to try to do. And then this thought came up, and I don't really want to do that because I do think it will make it worse. So I asked her to change worse to more intense, and she's like, okay, I can try it. Well, a week later, she reported back that she went and followed through on this thought she'd had, or rather this thought that had come to her, and the individual that she was needing to interact with, it made it more intense. It made the situation a bit more tense as well. But then, if I remember correctly, the next day it was, after that, so 24 hours after the intensity came up, this same person came to my friend and said, I am so impressed with the way you handled things. I really wish I were more like you. You're such a role model for me. And this friend of mine said, I'm not sure how sincere this person was in saying this. And I just had to stop them and say, how much courage did it take that person to come to you and say, I'm so glad you handled this the way you did? That takes a lot of courage. So don't discount the sincerity just because it would be easy to, well, you're a good person, everything's good, and I'll walk away, and I don't really mean it. It takes some courage to say things like that. And as I've had other students, other people, as I've guided them through this very simple process, let the mind be still, think about the circumstances, let the mind be still, ask what's next, let the mind be still, wait for those thoughts to come up, and then do it. It sounds simple. And it is simple. The difficult part comes from, are you going to follow through with this simple thought that has come up for you? And for those of you who are in the meditation in motion training, this is taking the third key off the mat into your everyday life, where you are not the one actually doing anything to make something happen. You're simply letting things happen. And for those of you who are like, what do you mean meditation, motion training? What's this third key you're talking about? Next week, Thursday, so a week from tomorrow night, we will begin a 4-day retreat at the Krishna Temple in Spanish Fork. And on Thursday night, we'll actually talk some about these keys and how they can help you in your everyday practical experience of life. So if you can't come for the whole retreat, come down to Spanish Fork, spend an evening Thursday night with us, and learn something about yourself. Discover something fantastic about you. And if you decide you want to stay for the whole retreat, you can register that night as well. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. It keeps coming up. It's something that's been very beneficial for me in my life, and I've watched it be very beneficial for others in theirs. And I hope you'll be able to use it for your own benefit as well. So just again, very briefly, what are those steps? Let the mind be still. Think about the circumstances for a moment. Let the mind be still. Ask, what's next? Let the mind be still. Watch for the recurring thought to show up and do that. All right, well, it's just about time for me to get started with Yoga Nidra here. We hold Yoga Nidra here at Bhakti House every Wednesday at 8 p.m. And I hope that I'll see you here soon sometime. And until then, Jai Bhagwan.